Welcome to Searching for the Question Live. My name is David Orban, and I'm very glad to have all of you following the show. We are streaming on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Twitch, in groups, on pages and accounts. And it doesn't matter where you are following from, you can make comments and ask questions, and I will be able to select the best ones to discuss and answer them together with my guests. The theme that we are going to discuss today is very close to my interests. I have been studying exponential and jolting technologies for a long time, and several years ago I came to the conclusion that it was natural, actually necessary, for these to lead towards decentralization. And it was also interesting to explore what are the advantages, the disadvantages, the limits, the challenges that this new structure would bring, both to businesses, but also to our socio-economic organization on a planetary scale. So very recently, I saw on Facebook the announcement of the publication of a book entitled Decentralization. I reached out to the authors, and they very graciously accepted to be on Searching for the Question Live as guests today. So welcome, Craig Calcaterra, and welcome, Wulf Kaal, to Searching for the Question Live.
Thanks for having me.
So Craig, I don't know if people pronounce your name as Italian as I have, typically, and I don't know how many generations removed you are from being Italian, but that is correct, I would assume, right? Yeah, you are
yes.
Italian. Then.
Yes, 2 generations back. My grandparents were farmers here in Montana, in the United States.
And where were they from in Italy? Do you know that? And have you visited?
Yes, close to Milano. And I spent a year in Trento, there in the north. And so I love Italy quite a lot.
But I would assume that 2 generations was enough for you not to learn the language, did you?
Yeah, no, solo un po'. I learned a lot when I lived there, but I've forgotten a lot of it. It was 7 years ago. I was a
and Wulf, you are from where?
Father Dutch, mother German.
All right, but both of you are in Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
And Craig, you were telling me right before we started how the 2 of you met and then decided to co-author the book that was just published. It is a funny story.
Right. Wulf was teaching a course. He's a law professor at the University of St. Thomas on disruptive innovation for law. And my wife was going back to school as a second career and took the course. And Wulf was recommending that anybody in the class should cultivate some relationships with people who have technological backgrounds. And my wife said, well, I know somebody with a technological background, and introduced us. And then Wulf introduced me to many different areas that are important to society and the law.
And how was the experience of writing a book together? I have never had the privilege of having a sparring partner with whom to clarify ideas and argue about how to express them. So in your case, Wulf, was it something that you would do again if you had a chance?
So Craig and I have published many papers together before we went into the book. And so I knew what to expect. And, Craig is a mathematician. It's 0 or 1. And Craig is typically right? When we get into a spat, most of the times Craig, because he has this background, 20 years, he built his own field in math, really. Dynamical systems, and Craig can tell you much better than I can about this. But yeah, so so we had published before, and so the book is really, it's a, Craig, how would you frame it? it's a narrative of what the prior papers can actually take the community to, right? So, so it was a natural tag-on addition to our prior thinking. And I had always said, Craig, we need to write a book. We're writing way too mathematical and theoretical and academic stuff, right? It's way too academic. Now, having said that, this book is pretty academic, Craig. It's still not, easily consumed. But yeah, so we came to this from the recognition of, well, it's one thing to tell a story. It's another thing to put a math model in front of somebody.
Yeah, it's trying to give a perspective to people that's unified, that's complete, about how these new technologies should be thought about when we are trying to build and architect these new companies, these new decentralized organizations. And so what is missing, what is needed, what will collapse a decentralized organization, a DAO. So if you don't have the right perspective, you're guaranteed to fail. And so that's the hope for the book.
So in your analysis and in your perspective, what led to even the possibility of an increasing number of people glimpsing that decentralized organizations may be better suited to today's needs and today's challenges?
Well, if you want me to handle that, we are already living with many different decentralized technologies. When you use Facebook, you are a decentralized provider of content. When we're using Google, it's aggregating information from all over. And so the same thing with Twitter and YouTube and all these other areas. But they're all centrally owned. And so there's a lot of downsides that go along with that. When the providers and the people are not in control of the message, then there's a different incentive structure for how the algorithms are going to be built than if the incentive structure, if it was, controlled in a decentralized manner. So we're seeing the technology is there, and we're seeing that it can improve society. But right now we're still living with some old school centralized thinking.
So you are contrasting a creator pool that is global and decentralized, and the equity and ownership structure of the content aggregators and the content channels that doesn't correspond to this topology that has emerged thanks to our global communications networks.
Precisely, and we're seeing that new structures are being built, but they're not historically backed up, right? These decentralized organizations have not traditionally been used by for-profit companies. We have Wikipedia that's pretty much controlled in a decentralized way. There are older structures like Alcoholics Anonymous, these sort of things, but they're usually non-profit organizations. And so the whole world is designed around helping out centralized companies, centralization, because centralization has an advantage over decentralized structures. It's more efficient in lots of different ways because each of the members have less control. They have a more isolated domain of power.
Let's stop on that statement for a minute. You said decentralization is more efficient. That is counterintuitive, isn't it? One would say, well, if I have to replicate the various functions all over once, if I have to coordinate certain types of action on arbitrary scale, where I don't even know when I start whether this coordination will be with someone I can physically meet with, or a completely legal structure, a completely different jurisdiction. That doesn't feel at first approximation as something that is more efficient.
I'm sorry, I cut out a bit of that.
Okay. Wulf, I don't know if you followed all of it.
Yeah, so David makes an important point, Craig, that we are addressing in the book throughout. So this is the dichotomy between the efficiencies that we're all used to, economies of scale and scope that you create through centralized systems. And so we're all accustomed to thinking that way, right? And so it's very hard for us, Craig, to switch out of this notion of centralized top-down hierarchical systems where you create a single point of failure that creates efficiency, but at the same time, for purpose of coordination and behavioral coordination, it's a single point of failure, right? So how can we claim that a decentralized system is more efficient, quote unquote? And I think you have to put that in the context of efficiency and longevity, right? So there are trade-offs between those. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So a centralized organization is optimally designed. It's really a mathematical ideal of efficiency, because all the members in the organization have their isolated domains of power. And so they don't waste time arguing, they don't waste time deciding on what's going to happen. And the problem is that these centralized hierarchies have a more crystalline static structure. So they don't negotiate their positions, and that's why they're efficient. Well, when a new challenge comes up, when there's a change in the market, then these centralized structures have a difficult time responding to that. Whereas a decentralized structure, a truly decentralized structure, is the market. It responds to the market because it automatically responds.
Let's go back to that concept of change and the reasons that change could favor decentralized versus centralized. But before we do that, I want to say hello to my friend Alex Lightman, who says decentralization is the greatest trend of the 21st century. There are so many trends in the 21st century. I don't know if this is the greatest. Maybe it is humanity becoming a multiplanetary species, or not going extinct, or whatever. But yes, this is one of the important ones. And then Alex is also asking, how can he get a signed copy from you guys? Let's
hang out. I always tell people, yeah, don't make me mail hard copies and kill trees, right? Let's hang out. Let's meet at a conference. And Craig and I will do everything in our power to get people engaged and talk to you. And if you so insist, we will also sign the book.
I really hope that as soon as possible, your publisher will make an electronic copy available, because, as you said, killing trees is bad. I actually, for several years, used to autograph ebooks by screenshotting the cover, and then I would email the person my signature over the screenshot of the cover. So back to the point. When we are talking about the longevity of a given organization, we are talking in evolutionary terms, and not necessarily about the individual, but the patterns that the individual represent, the species, and the longevity of the species is proportional to either the relative constant nature of its environment, or in a changing environment to its adaptability. And in biological organizations, i.e. biological organisms, there is a limit of the speed of change that genetic drift can express. And as a consequence, when there is a rapidly changing environment that exceeds the adaptability that the genetic drift allows, you will see extinctions of species, or even mass extinctions. So would it be correct to say that maybe a better term, rather than saying efficiency, is fitness? Decentralized organizations are fit to the needs of today's rapidly changing business environment, for example, or political environment, maybe, because they can morph and adopt necessary changes better than not the traditional centralized hierarchical ones.
Yeah, that's absolutely a good analogy to make for the situation.
So Wulf, tell me about a little bit of your background, given that you are a law professor. How did you arrive to thinking about these problems, and is your specialization such that it prepared you for being able to absorb the concepts here?
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. But before I do that, I wanted to pick on one point that you brought up, and let me paraphrase what I think you said. You were talking about the scalability of decentralized systems, right? I think that's an underpinning of some of the critique that you presented in the context of biological systems, right? Because there's a barrier at some point. And that's something, Craig, I don't know if you want to pick up on that, but so the scaling, I have many conversations where what we're proposing in the book, engineers are dealing with what we're proposing in the book, and they come to modeling it, and they're saying, but it doesn't scale, right? As in, it's harder to create network effects in the system because you actually need to put merit in, right? And sorry, I'm going a little bit too deep right now. But this is a very important question, David, that you alluded to, and I don't want to lose that, right? So the scaling is very, very important, right? So how do you scale a decentralized organization? So the way we portray it in the book, and Craig, I want you to jump in anytime. The way we portray it in the book is really, it's this micro-democratic meritocracy that we're envisioning, right? That this technology we think is facilitating. And so the question then becomes, how do you scale these micro-democratic systems? Meaning, where's the limit, and how many people can actually be brought on, right? And Craig, you know the implications, right? Because there are only so many people who have a certain expertise in the system, and will be onboarded by other people with the same or similar interest and expertise. And so the question becomes, if it's not expertise focused, then you can scale. But if it is expertise focused, Craig, the scaling becomes harder, right? And so yeah. I don't know if you want to say something about that, Craig. I don't want to.
Right. So I guess this brings up actually a point of contention between something I've heard you say before, David, and I don't want to create a fight or a competition.
Oh, but, no, let's fight. Let's
get into it.
Right. You mentioned that there's a valid point of view that our democracies are failing, right? And that direct democracy is the only solution, that representative democracy is flawed. And so this whole idea of expertise scaling that you're bringing up, Wulf, is directly relevant to that. There are only certain experts. And so we don't want we don't want to have the tyranny of the majority that happens up. That's what Alexis de Tocqueville explained as he's criticizing American democracy back in the 1800s, that they would have this flat, decentralized hierarchy that America's dream was, of this perfect democracy, that everybody was equal. And so the concern then is that, well, what happens with expert opinions then? They're drowned out by the common opinions. And so you do want to have some sort of place where expertise can flourish, where it can be rewarded properly. You do want a meritocracy involved in this, but you also want to build equity. So you have to have this tension between these two values of equity, where everybody gets an equal amount. Well, if you have that, then the meritocracy doesn't work. A meritocracy says, no, I need to be rewarded appropriately to my efforts. And so how do you build a society that balances these two tensions? If you go for a completely centralized society, then that's a complete meritocracy. The top people get the most. And if you go for a completely flat society, basically, if you want complete equity, the only way you can get that is complete chaos, where everybody is flat. The perfect balance in between, the Goldilocks solution between these two tensions of meritocracy and equity, is you need some sort of autonomy amongst the people. You need an organization that's still decentralized, an organization that still has a flat equal opportunity for everybody, but an equal opportunity to thrive and to provide your skills. And so decentralization is the right solution that's between these two perfectly centralized and chaotic, unorganized systems.
It may also be the case that as people themselves, each individual member of a larger organization, on a path, on a dynamic trajectory in their lives, in their skills, in their aspirations, in how idealistic they are, but maybe less prepared, or they become more cynical, but much more effective in manipulating the levers of society or that particular organization. A decentralized topology allows one not to be necessarily boxed in a role and has many more dimensions, many more exit routes through which to gain a different perspective for once, expose themselves to new kinds of experiences, let be tested by the organization itself in terms of the value that they can provide, and as a consequence, they gain the reputation they deserve, and aggregate around themselves the resources that can bring them to achieve goals that are not theirs alone, but the goals that have been shared among all of at least in a geometrical sense, not in a geographical sense, in their proximity. So the role of experts and expertise is not to support and to prove the decisions that come from the top, but is to ignite support from the bottom and to allow others to flourish and maybe to learn and emulate or compete with whoever inspires them the most.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You have something to say, Wulf?
I think David was also alluding to self-sovereign identity, right? And so Craig and I have written on this, and we've talked about how reputation systems can also be the foundation for a truly functional self-sovereign identity, right? Where the way these scores are built, David, are giving. And so this is, how do people create identity in decentralized, anonymous, and autonomous systems, right? So self-sovereign identity. I'm not sure how familiar you are, David, with this debate, right? But what you alluded to is actually directly in when you started talking about it, I instantaneously thought, oh, this is self-sovereign identity, right? So how do we create identities for people where you allow information to come from the edge, from the bottom up, right? Without penalty, without the human condition, without discrimination, with all the things that afflict society otherwise, right? And these systems that Craig and I are writing about, this is sort of the perfect universe of experimentation about how you can create these scores and create these identities in decentralized systems that allow people to connect to each other in different ways, in ways that are really unprecedented. And I want to say something about also the NFT communities, right? So I've spent on Clubhouse many hours with people who are very, very active in the NFT community. And if you watch what they do and how powerful those communities are and how much they thrive on this idea of self-sovereign identity, so SSI, right? And if you give them the right governance, and decentralized governance, which is very few even are talking about, right? Even though they don't even realize that how much they need it, right? So if you give them this and you set them up with this, I think we will see a surge in innovation and community engagement that is, quite frankly, is unprecedented, right? In the diversity of the community, in the way the community connects. Sorry, I could keep on, but this is a very, very exciting time, David. And if you watch what young people say about what they want to do in the future, right? There's very little, hey, I want to join a profession. That's all about creative arts, all about being creative out there in decentralized networks, right? And I just saw some of those, some of that data come through. So these are very, very exciting times.
And apart from the book, the viewers that are following can also find your papers that can be freely downloaded on this website, which I will now post as a banner here for us. It is sufficient to search for your last names, for example.
Yeah, so Craig is less comfortable with this. We would encourage people to look at the final version, which is the book, which is clean. These are preprint versions that are not entirely clean, but we felt like we wanted to get the community engagement, so we posted those on SSRN.
And I think that is wonderful for many reasons. One, because the attention span of many of us is such that a full book is, even though, you know, this goes all around, by the way. So I love books. However, I'm also part of the 21st century, where when I post a video that is 10 minutes long, I feel like, 15 seconds TikTok, maybe people won't watch for 10 minutes. So having a 10-page paper is actually very good. Including the 10-line abstract, and the other fact, once again, that it can be downloaded electronically, and the speed of your ideas spreading around is much faster than not the book itself having to physically travel. And yes, in these papers you talk about many of the themes of the book about decentralized finance, decentralized governance, and the importance of reputation for the evolution of decentralization. So Wulf, maybe tell me a little bit about why do you think it is useful or even possible to substitute the concept of reputation instead of using what has been for thousands of years its blunt proxy, which is money. We were assuming that if you were a billionaire because your grandfather was a robber baron, I should do business with you because you were trustworthy and reputable, right? Even the word to be reputable is almost synonymous with being wealthy, and of course that is absurd. But in the past, we didn't have a way to do anything else than rely on that proxy. Is it now possible to do without?
Okay, so let me, I think the good way to handle is that Craig talks about the historical perspective, and I talk more about the current perspective on this, because I know Craig has a lot of deep thinking in this context. So the question you're asking, can reputation replace money, is an extremely important question, right? And why should it? How are we changing from a zero-sum game to a positive-sum game, right? That is one of my favorite lines, right? And before I handle my part and then pass on to Craig, so I come at this from the perspective of what is the role of DAOs in the future, right? How can DAOs exist in the future, which is really what the book is trying to answer, right? And for that, you need, for DAOs to exist and to create decentralized governance, you need this idea of reputation replacing fungible tokens, right? Okay, so let me back off. Before we go into this, so I come at this completely from the DAO perspective, right? So if we look at existing technology, and we talk about this quite a bit in the book, so in a smart contract, so we all know what a smart contract is, right? So we have two counterparties, they're often anonymous, don't know each other, they're coordinating their conduct and exchanging value through a smart contract, where the contract, the code, replaces the human interaction and is automated. What is the natural outcome of that? Is it better human conduct, more ethical human conduct, or less ethical human conduct, right? And we can talk about this. And I have quote-unquote pissing matches with people I talk to every day about this very thing, right? Because a lot of engineers believe, no, we automate, this is great. We'll cut out the middleman. disintermediation and the machine takes over, right? Because you humans don't have to behave if the machine has automated it, right? I don't have to worry about what is my counterparty thinking about my conduct if I only rely on the code and the code has coordinated the human interaction, right? Because you can't step outside of the code, right? Code is law. I teach a whole course on this, right? Is that true? Is code law, right? We can have a long discussion about this. Okay, so Craig and I believe, Craig can jump in anytime, that these smart contracts that we see proliferate, that they actually corrupt human behavior, that they're actually undercutting long-term positive sum games. And
yeah, maybe I can talk about that a little bit.
Go ahead, Craig, go ahead.
Yeah, if you don't mind getting in just a superficial version of a game theory discussion, right? That's where this zero sum versus positive sum terminology comes from, right? Because if you have a single game, if you have a single interaction, if you have a single negotiation, if you have a single contract, then the idea is that each party should behave as avariciously as they possibly can, because whatever money's on the table, well, it's all going to be gone at the end of the game. And so whatever you can get is what you should try to get. So if you have a single stage game like that, then there's no reason for reputation. It's just oligarchy, that money is and power is more important. And so money is what you're going to go for. But if you have a repeated game, if you have a game that is going to happen again tomorrow, and that's fortunately the situation we live in life, is that we're going to do business tomorrow and the next day and the next day, then you have the opportunity to create a positive sum game. You actually have an opportunity to create something through your interaction. And the thing you can create that's going to be valuable, creating something out of nothing, is reputation. And that's because both players can then behave positively towards each other. They can actually not try to take as much advantage of the person as possible.
Craig, this is, people often don't understand what this means. I think the McGreevy really illustrate this super powerfully. So if you want to talk about that, I think that it helps put it into context.
Yeah. So just to finish that, though, is
that just a little remark. This is a conversation I had about the impact of accelerating change with John and Ash, talking about game theory and things like that. We won't listen to it. You can find it on YouTube if you're interested. It is my most hated video.
A lot of downvotes.
Even though quite a few people see it, because I dare to, rather than just sit and listen, I dare to speak. Yeah, and probably they are right. I should have shut up more, just like now. So Craig, sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
That's fascinating. No, so if you have repeated games over and over again, then you can create reputation, and reputation has a positive sum situation. You could actually invent value out of nowhere. And so the example for that, and not only that, it's crucial, it's essential if you're going to maintain stable long-term business. And a great example for that is way back from 1,000 years ago, the McGreevy traders. These are a set of Jewish settlers, Jewish traders across the Silk Road who were based in Egypt. And they had to maintain some sort of difficult challenges here. They had to communicate across the Silk Road. They had a principal who would invest their money, and then the agent would have to take the money and go trade along the Silk Road. They had to make some sort of contract where you would trust this person in this game, basically, to not steal all the money. And so how do you actually do that? And so their solution, when they had these same problems that we have, is like, you might not even know the person very well, and you're not going to be related to them. You're going to not see them for 6 months. There's gigantic distances involved. It's the same situation now with the decentralized world we're trying to build, with DAOs, with decentralized organizations that are global in scope, where anybody in the world can join, and they can join anonymously. How are we going to make sure that the business transactions are healthy and harmonious? And the only solution that they could come up with was a very stable, very strong and rich reputational system. That way, the people were more concerned with reputation than they were with the actual profit, because the reputation promised they could continue to make profits in the future. So everybody behaved well. And so you can read about it in the book. It's a good story that explains how they solved those distance problems.
So to go back to the remark that Wulf made about NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and link it to the issue of money as a proxy for reputation. the silly example that I made of a robber baron grandfather that makes his grandson wealthy, but that does not mean that person is trustworthy, illustrates the issue that if money were a good proxy for reputability, then its fungibility is actually a negative property rather than being a positive property. And the fact that NFTs, non-fungible tokens, better represent the individual's characteristics, and that their provenance, even if it is owned by someone else, as an illustration for our viewers who may not be familiar with NFTs that much. Not that anyone is, because they are a new thing, right? So 10 years ago, I posted this tweet. Bitcoin P2P virtual currency. I wish you good luck and good fortune against the ire of nation states everywhere. Bitcoin.org, April 20, 2011. And it sat there for 10 years, gathering dust, until I rediscovered it and put it up for sale on this website that makes it extremely pleasant and very, very easy to do so. And Stefan T. Bought it for, rather than $1 million, which I believe is what would have been the right price, he bought it for $139. Now, a piece of confusion that many people make is he didn't buy the copyright to the text that I wrote. He didn't achieve the deletion of the original tweet, which is as available as before on Twitter. But he created a provable, traceable, transparent, and permanent link between me and him, as well as any other future owner of the NFT, which can be tracked on the blockchain. And it is the new topology of these provable, transparent relationships that will design a kind of a trust model that is unprecedented. And Wulf, probably that is why you believe that NFTs are important in representing a new world of reputation.
There's actually something better that Craig and I haven't talked about enough.
For some reason.
Sorry?
I cannot hear you right now.
Hello? Check, check, check. Craig, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Wulf.
Craig, can you hear him?
I can hear Wulf.
Oh, okay. Then go ahead. Everyone else can. I can't, but I will resolve it while you are speaking.
So the NFT craze, this is a little bit of the Facebook investors, they're now in NFTs. NFTs are the new craze, right? But this is fungible. These are fungible assets, right? So when we talk about reputation, Craig and I, when we started writing the book, well, the research, we always thought of them in terms of NFT. So you're building reputation scores in wallets as NFTs, right? There is actually, the more I thought about it, and Craig and I haven't sufficiently talked about the implications, there is another accounting metric that one can use that actually is less transferable, Craig. And those are weighted keys, right? So you can actually use weighted keys as a way to account for reputation scores in a given system, similar to the way the Maghribi did it in a culturally monolithic environment, right? And you can do this now through technology in a much broader, open, diverse cultural setting, yeah? And so NFTs, David, everything that's happening in the NFT environment, this is market-driven, right? This is people jumping on and artists fulfilling themselves and finding new ways to market themselves and raise funds, et cetera, et cetera. It's all wonderful. It's an enormous innovation. And if you think about what the gaming environment can do to this, it's quite very, very powerful. Let me distinguish this though a little bit, right? So when Craig and I are talking about reputation systems, governance systems, we are talking about organically grown reputation as a merit identifier, as SSI, right? So you're creating these scores in different DAO environments, in different meritocracy, in different merit environments. And the totality of those scores from different DAOs together give this sense of identity in those systems. But if you want to build that, David, you need to create a system in which you cannot or sell or make it more difficult, as you say, to sell that reputation. Because as you said, you use the analogy with the Baron, right, who sold his fortune to his nephew or grandson. The grandson may be a terrible individual. The Baron accumulating that wealth must have had some merit in the way he interoperated in the world. It could be ethically bad, but at least we know the merit is identifiable and quantifiable. So when Craig and I talk about reputation, we're actually removing this from this. So this question that you posed earlier, right? How can reputation replace money? The way reputation can replace money is if you grow it organically and you use it as a means of generating future cash flows, right? So in other words, you grow it organically independently from fungible assets. And the fungible assets that other people may want to give you for that intangible, non-fungible reputation, that's a fungible asset that is paid in proportion to your reputation. Craig, please jump in anytime. But important is it's not, the business does not in this model revolve around how much money do people have. It revolves around how good is their reputation in a given environment that legitimizes paying future cash flows to that reputation, right?
Yeah, so just to talk about non-fungible tokens.
Sorry, Craig, I just want to alert you, and please keep answering, that I will pull out of the picture, disappear under my standing desk, and try to solve the issue of my audio. I have been lip reading Wulf's speaking right now. So until you see me reappear, the two of you go ahead.
Okay, I can talk a bit about non-functional or non-fungible tokens. Like, first off, for the audience, like, what does fungible mean is the crucial idea involved here. And fungible is the way that money works. If I put an ounce of gold on the table and another ounce of gold on the table, we can switch them around, and I don't care which one I get. They're fungible. They're interchangeable. I can replace them. Whereas a non-fungible token is unique. It's a unique token associated with one idea, as in the case of David's tweet. So then the idea is, so for each different piece, you have these unique, non-interchangeable properties. And so you can associate that property with something like your tweet in a way that comes from hash functions mathematically. That's the tool that we use to give a unique identifier to each one of these tokens. So the idea is that I have two different minds on these non-fungible tokens. They're not absolutely new. If anybody remembers what was the cat craze from Ethereum for a while? The
CryptoKitties.
CryptoKitties, there you go. See, that's the exact same thing. And they have other things like crypto zombies, and they have other non-fungible tokens here. This is quite brilliant that you can tokenize basically any digital idea. So it's quite wonderful. And so I like the idea. And also it's quite funny. But I also find it completely reprehensible. Basically, it's similar to modern art, in my opinion, that a lot of it is a scam. And so, of course, we can have a big, long argument about what is truly valuable in society and whether or not it's helping things. The only thing I see is that it does put some long-term stamp on history, right? On your token, on your first tweet, it gives it some meaning. And so it is valuable in this new marketplace of virtual reality. And so,
Craig, here is something to freak you out even more, which is pretty recent, maybe a week's old. It's called BitClout, invitation only. They raised $150 million. It is said that from Anderson Horowitz to the Winklevoss brothers, all of the top tier Silicon Valley VCs participated in their round. And what BitClout does is it allows you to be rewarded for the content that you create through people being able to buy a fractional share of your coin. And the platform totally automatically handles the not only buying and selling, but the market making, the price fixing of your coin, and the issuance of new coins on your behalf, and so on. And there has been some confusion, and it has been reported that the Bitcoin you put into the system, you couldn't get it out, which alarmed a lot of people, and that is not correct. You can get out the Bitcoin that you put into the system. As of right now, once you convert the Bitcoin into the BitClout token, the reverse for now is not possible. So all your BitClout can only live on the BitClout system as of right now. I expect that it will be possible to get it out as well, which will lessen the probability of BitClout itself being a scam. And it is fascinating. Also, as you said, potentially completely reprehensible in terms of putting a monetary value on people and their actions. Extremely addictive, dangerously addictive as well, but a fascinating experiment for sure, and potentially valuable both for the participants and for the network, and an important competitive alternative to the traditional advertising-based monetization models of Twitter, Facebook, Google, YouTube, everyone else. So I would really recommend our viewers to check it out. Don't put in more than you are ready to lose, as always, and have get your hands dirty, have a real experience with what can be done, and I think that is a very important feature of so many of these technologies. They have a practically zero barrier to entry. Everyone who is driven by curiosity and by passion for understanding can experiment with them, making up their own mind with regards of whether they find them valuable, and then invest more time, maybe money, but definitely being able to speak of out of experience rather than hearsay, or out of authority because someone they admire said so. And I think this is also very important, because in the past this was not the case. You would either hear something that happened very far away, or even if the things that were happening with new technologies were local to you, they would never be immediately available to anyone. And today that is practically the case. Even exotic new things like a quantum computer, the makers of quantum computers are begging for your attention as a developer, right? And maybe they will give you just a few seconds of computing time. But if you go to the D-Wave website, you can sign up to use their quantum computer, set up your problem, run it on the quantum computer, and have a much better understanding of what people are talking about when they talk about quantum computers. So this accessibility, I think, is also an important component of why decentralized systems can be so attractive, because it doesn't matter in the geographical lottery where you were born. If you have a computer and internet access, you can coach yourself or be mentored by others to be anything. Wulf.
What you're saying is so important. So the accessibility is something that I've been talking about a lot in the last 6 months. And this Craig and I are talking about in the book, we're calling it an intuitive UX, right? Something that people can actually interoperate with. And I sometimes say, well, it has to be as easy as iTunes. There is, of course, a difference between coordinating human conduct and decentralized systems and downloading music, right? So how do you get people to be drawn in and get this idea to be accessible? This is something that Craig and I have, quite frankly, been struggling with for a long time, right? Because we weren't able to. The book was an attempt to translate it to people, but Craig and David, what really has to happen is you have to build a UI to let people, gamified ideally, experience the reputation governance, right? The governance in decentralized systems. So I started talking to World of Warcraft people, where they have this loot idea, where people go on these games and they have loot, and they need to find a way to redistribute the loot. And the reason why I'm engaging in these long conversations, nights, 3-hour conversations, why should you redistribute the loot one way or over another way, and what is a better equitable way, and how can you give people reputation points in this, right? So I've been on really long conversations about this, and it always comes down to this. They're really interested, they need it, they really need this governance, but they can't relate to it, right? So what we have to do as a community is we have to give them an intuitive gamified UI where people can plug in and they understand, yeah, if I do X, I stake loot, right? I have loot, I got loot, I can stake other assets. And this staking, and just to be clear, David, the reason why Bitcoin proliferated 10 years ago was because of gamers, right? Gamers knew instantaneously what this thing is, whereas other people say, what is that? I can't touch it? No, I'm not gonna mess with it, right? So gamers knew instantaneously, oh, I use this in games, now I can use it in the real world, right? And it's the same way in governance, right? When we talk about accessibility, you have to do it, you have to gamify it, get it in front of people, get it into gaming communities, experience decentralized governance. And once they're comfortable with, they understand it, then they are more comfortable building things with it, right? So, and that takes time. So accessibility is super important.
As an illustration of your point, that the gamers flocked to Bitcoin, Mt. Gox, which is not Mount Gox as some mistakenly pronounce it, was one of the first Bitcoin exchanges, then famously went bankrupt. I am still receiving the bankruptcy proceedings communications in Japanese language because they are still trying to make up their minds how many of the Bitcoins I had stuck on the exchange as some other people. I wasn't alone. I should receive back out of the bankruptcy. The name Mt. Gox stood for Magic the Gathering Online Exchange, because originally it wasn't for cryptocurrency, it was for trading in-game objects in various ways. And Brock Pierce, another of the Aboriginal Bitcoin aficionados, had actually China-based gold farmers who would spend their time in online games creating the magic swords and other items that Westerners were too lazy to invest the time that was necessary for possessing, and then putting those up on eBay for sale. and that is how he became also familiar with all the concepts of digital objects and digital scarcity, which is of course non-intuitive to start with. Now, you published the book. It came out actually just a few days ago, if I'm not mistaken. Congratulations. It is always a wonderful feeling when a prolonged intellectual effort can culminate with something that you can touch and smell. And so what's next? What do you think, if you still talk to each other after this, what will you do? Are you going to go to Silicon Valley, raise a bunch of money, and put your thoughts into a startup, making sure that people can build effective DAOs with a beautiful user interface for governance for the next 8 billion people on the planet?
Well, I can answer that I'm the voice in the wilderness. I'm not interested in that. I'm happy in my ivory tower. And so I'm actually just criticizing from the outside. And so I find the day-to-day much more difficult. And I always hand that off to Wulf when he's much better at the diplomacy part.
Yeah, so I see this duality is really great because Craig and I, we are just phenomenal. I mean, I love the exchange with Craig, the ideation. And so, but to answer your question, David, we can build this. We can build this, but you cannot build it in a centralized setting. You cannot build it with a for-profit company. You can only do it in a non-profit environment, in an open source non-profit environment. That's how you can do this. And I don't want to promote anything in particular, but I'm very, very hopeful that the DAO community that I'm involved with is able to build this system. Now, will it be the perfect system, Craig?
Well, I'm promoting your book. Let's promote the DAO community. What's the URL?
Okay, it's devxdao.com. I'm pretty firm that we have an enormous. This will be, in my opinion, the world's largest non-profit grant-giving entity for open source software. I have no doubt in my mind that this is going to materialize. Based on our donors, based on everything that's going on, I have no doubt that this is going to happen. Now there are risks, of course, that we all have to work really hard, and I have 18-hour days sometimes, 16 hours, 14 hours usual, I guess. But it's so worth it. The cause is so worth it. I don't want to get too philosophical about it because there's a lot of tech that we have to build and create and make available and accessible, as we talked about. But the cause is so. I look at this as a way to quote unquote overcome the human condition. If we get it right, if we figure out a way to make changes and upgrade systems that haven't been built. And we're currently in a bull run in the crypto environment, so I'm extremely grateful for all the wonderful people who are working with me in this context: Timothy Lewis, Tim Messer, Marco Onibali. The list is endless. I mean, we have really brilliant people who share the same vision. And you see, David, this is essential for a DAO environment. You need to bring people on who share, and we talk about this in the book, right? Unifying transcendental values, right? And this is the DAO community really is united in this desire for decentralized community building, and you can't do it without governance, right? As I always say, a DAO is only as good as the underlying governance, and so I've updated Craig quite regularly, actually, on this what's happening here. But this is a grant-giving DAO for now, right? So this is redistributing value and growing communities. But we are able to use a reputation system, at least partially, not the pure system, Craig, that you and I are envisioning. But you know why that's not possible, because because of the bootstrap problem, right? We always have the bootstrap problem that you cannot build this unless you get over the bootstrap phase. And this DAO very clearly is in bootstrap for at least another year. But after that, and already now, right? So we're engaging with the Casper community. Casper community is phenomenal. I mean, we started talking about this, David, at the very beginning of this chat. The idea of pluggable consensus that the Casper community is talking about, and the level of experimentation and creating forward-looking designs that are business-friendly as well as community building through this is what's needed. And they need a DAO. We need the layer one. It's a match made in heaven, really. And so I'm extremely confident that we can build something phenomenal. So stay tuned, and we'll get it out.
And I have some DevX tokens, and I am happy to use them. So
so this is goes back to this question we addressed earlier, right? Can reputation replace money? You can't buy reputation, right? You can buy Casper tokens, and I want to encourage you. I mean, if you look at what happened in their pre-sale, I'm not, of course, not giving financial advice. So it's an enormous project. It's very, very powerful. And what they have on the platform with weighted keys, it really feeds directly into the reputation systems that Craig and I are talking about in the book. And so, yeah, it's a very, very exciting time to be in these communities. And if you look at the partnerships that the DevX DAO is starting to generate, so we have machine learning communities, we have NFT gaming communities. They're all coming in as DAOs within the DevX DAO environment, right? If you look at all these communities that are coming into this, the DevX DAO is becoming a DAO of DAOs, right? Where you generate ideas, you get people comfortable with the reputation governance system. It's not a pure system at this point, right? But you get them comfortable with it. They export it into their communities. They're getting paid in certain tokens, in this case, in Casper. So Casper decentralizes. We at the same time are able to export our governance. It's a beautiful system that benefits. It's a win-win for everybody, right? So I'm very excited about this, and I hope I can get Craig to play a much more active role in this.
That's wonderful, and it is a wonderful way of also closing today's episode, because it gives me the opportunity to reach out in a year's time and say, hey, Wulf, you remember saying that DevX DAO needs another year's time before being ready? Is it ready? Come back.
Check the webpage again in a few weeks, please.
Very good.
Check it. Yeah.
So Craig and Wulf, thank you very much for being on Searching for the Question Live.
Really great. Thank you for hosting us.
It was a pleasure, David. Good to meet you.
Me too.
So thank you, everyone, for watching Searching for the Question Live. I hope that you enjoyed the show. We have a Discord server where you can join to continue the conversation. Subscribe to my Italian channel, where there are other types of conversations in Italian. And if you feel that I provide you with value in understanding and interpreting the rapidly changing world, where actually the rate of change is accelerating, we are living in a world of jolting technologies, feel free to support me and my team on Patreon at patreon.com/David Orban. And I will see you at the next episode of Searching for the Question Live.